Hi everybody and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays. I'm Jason Barnard, the brand sub guy from Kalicube, and today I'm with Jes Scholz. Welcome, Jes.
Thanks for having me on again.
Brilliant, you get the song. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Jes Scholz. And last time you were talking about Google Discover, and you talked about Google Discover as a social channel, which was really hugely interesting. And now we're having you back for Gemini, and you keep talking about the future. So Discover is now something that's everybody's got every day. A couple of years ago when you were on the show, it was new. Gemini is new now. In a couple of years, it's going to be completely normal for everybody, and we'll have forgotten what search was like because we'll be talking to these machines, having conversations with them, and that's going to be super interesting. Before that, though, a bit of traditional SEO, traditional SERPs is your brand SERP with your knowledge panel, which looks absolutely lovely. And looking at that, very rich with the knowledge panel cards at the top. Great work done there. That demonstrates that Google understands who you are and what you do, a marketing consultant, and also associates you with that list of people who are all in the SEO industry or marketing industries, showing that Google has got your cohort, your peer group exactly spot on. That's really, really important. What we're seeing from the killer whale updates over the last 9 months is, number one, understanding who you are. Number two, understanding what your subtitle is. And number three, understanding who are the people who are most closely associated with you for the cohort that you currently are recognized for by Google. And if anybody wants to learn more about knowledge panel building or even brand SERPs or online reputation management, sign up for the Kalicube newsletter and you'll learn all about how to educate Google like Jes Scholz has done, so that it understands who you are, what you do, who you serve, and why you're credible. Now, all of that is super important as well for Gemini, because the machine is becoming smart and it's having conversations with its users. So we're going to start with that. How would you represent, or how would you present the fundamental differences between search today and Google's Gemini era tomorrow?
I think it comes in two aspects. So the first aspect, and the one that's talked about most, is that the interaction changes from I'm typing keywords into a search box and then getting a list of blue links or rich snippets as a result, to I'm typing in an interface where I'm having a conversation more like I would do with a friend. And so these search queries change from here are 5 keywords altogether to here are contextual conversations. So the keyword might be just, white. If previously I've said, okay, I'm looking for a car and I want a white car, I'm not going to type in white car again because I don't have to, because it maintains the context of the previous queries, which does not happen with the current search box. So as soon as you're thinking keyword optimization and Gemini comes in, forget about it, because there are no keywords. There is no intent behind a certain word, because the intent is inherent in the whole context of the conversation, and Google's not surfacing that data. So even if you're saying, okay, I'm using Google Search Console and I'm looking at queries in Google Search Console, more and more that information is going to be less valuable, because that's not where all of the conversations are going to be happening.
Right. So we need to forget about keywords, think about context, think about how this machine is communicating with the user. Now, to what extent is the user asking the machine? And to what extent is the machine, Gemini in this case, driving the conversation, guiding the conversation with the user?
That depends on what interface you're in. So if you're in what I call Gemini chat, Google, gemini.google.com, obviously the user's in the driving seat there. They're saying, this is what I want to know, and Gemini's spitting back an answer, and then they might be qualifying that answer. But what we need to understand about Gemini is the models that are now being integrated into all of Google's surfaces. So Gemini is in search not only as the thing that powers the SGE snippet, it's also the thing that's part of analyzing the indexing of the content and then informing what topics this is about, what entities this is about, and thus informing rankings in traditional search results, or informing visibility on Google Discover or Google News. It's also being integrated now very clearly in Google Maps. You can have a conversation with Gemini in Maps as of a couple of months ago. So Gemini is not just a chatbot. And if you're thinking Gemini is ChatGPT, you are fundamentally mistaken. Gemini is like a core algorithm update. It's a whole new aspect of these algorithms that decide visibility.
And that's visibility across everything on Google. I mean, you mentioned Google Discover, and what we're seeing more and more in Google Discover is when you see an article, for example, about Bill Gates, it will link through to the search result for Bill Gates. Is that going to change to become linking through to a Gemini conversation or linking through to search generative experience?
I don't think so. So it's not that Google's on a track to replace all traditional search and replace all surfaces with Gemini. What we're seeing is that they're utilizing the understanding of their large language model technology to be able to offer consumers choices. You can come and interact with the chatbot, or you can click on filters which are influenced by generative AI to what those filters should be. Or you can interact with any of the other surfaces which are navigational based surfaces like a vertical such as Google News or Google for Jobs. And that's also got Gemini analyzing the content to return for your queries, but it doesn't have, this generative AI, conversational AI overlay. So it's giving the user choice how they want to consume what Google has to offer. I think the key about Gemini is you need to understand that it's increasing the quality and accessibility of the index, or will do that in the future. Obviously, we're talking about technology that is not that old. It is still learning. Right now, it has some issues. But if you remember search back 20 years ago, that had some issues as well.
100%. And there are a couple of things there. Number one is, back in the days of the blue links that you just mentioned, SEO was very simple. You rank number one with the blue link, you get the click. It's absolutely brilliant. And then rich elements came into play, the knowledge graph with the knowledge panels, different verticals, universal search, now Gemini. Is SEO becoming increasingly difficult because the different targets that we can potentially hit are becoming more and more numerous and more complex?
It depends how you see SEO. It's definitely becoming more technical. There's more to understand. There's more to do. There's more levers that you can pull to impact results. But at the same time, I think we're seeing a reversion to something much more simplistic and pure about marketing, and that's brand. Because at the end of the day, if you know what your brand voice is, you know who your brand is, and other people are reflecting that back, and they're reflecting that you're a high quality brand who's notable and useful in your industry, then SG is really, really good for you. And all you have to do is be a good brand. The challenge is defining what that means. Like, be a good brand. What does that mean for SEO? And I think that's changing the way that your SEOs that have been there, maybe 5 years or 7 years, they came up with this keyword presumption that still wasn't actually a reality. And now they're being told to change again. And it's a lot of change, and there's resistance to that change. And when you're saying actually SEO is a strong part of SEO, I would say what will become one of the most central parts of SEO is no longer links. It's about brand. You have these technical marketers revolting. Right,
yeah, and the links is something that I see having reduced impact, significantly reduced. Generally speaking, the SEO industry is not comfortable with that, let's say.
And I think that gives an opportunity for the brands who do understand that this is the biggest change in search since search came to be with Google. This is not an algorithm update. This is not a rejigging of an existing process. This is a fundamentally new way of Google categorizing content in their index, and a fundamental new way of users being taught to interact across Google surfaces. So if you're still holding on to keywords and links, well,
yeah, 100%. Now, I was having a conversation earlier on where somebody was saying to me, well, I can see keywords and I can see links. It's something I can physically see. brand is this fluffy concept. What do I do with it? There's nothing pragmatic for me to get a grip on and to understand and to start working on. It's a fluffy, theoretical, philosophical idea.
I would say definitely not.
Ooh,
You can
good.
see it. It's there in the knowledge graph. You can query it with an API. Ooh, nice technical. And you can get back. Does Google recognize your brand exists? If it exists, how does it classify it? What corroboration sources are important for that? You can go and look in Gemini. You can say, hey, what is my brand? And you can see exactly what it gives back. And you can click the little G button to see who it cites for that. You can ask, what is my business model? With that, you can see who they give back in the business model, essentially who they think is the most important, most EEAT signal worthy result. Are you in those results? If not, well, then you know you have an issue with Google Knowledge Graph understanding of your brand entity versus your topical choice, the industry you want to be in. So there's a lot of things that you can track and that you can monitor to understand your brand presence. It's just not going to be in any of those traditional SEO tools. So you need to kind of really look at, if you're paying for a tool that's focused on keywords and links, are you using the best technical solutions to modern SEO, or are you just clinging to something that you find comfortable and understandable? You need to push yourself beyond those boundaries and find new ways of understanding performance for the future.
Right. I mean, you already know this, Jes, but Kalicube Pro measures exactly what you're talking about, not focused on keywords and not focused on links. And as far as I know, it's the only platform out there that does that. But the interesting thing for us there is that we can measure all of this, and the Kalicube Pro platform tells us what we need to do. How does somebody without access to a platform like Kalicube understand what they need to do to improve these KPIs that you've just mentioned?
I think step one is really understand who your brand is. So a lot of the time I'll be working with my clients. The first question I'll ask is, what is your unique selling proposition? And often they'll come back with what their business model is. Now that's not a unique selling proposition. Like, what sets you apart from all of your competitors? And once you've identified what that is and aligned it within your organization, how much do you live that? Because you can say we're the #1 trafficked website. If SimilarWeb doesn't agree with you, then Google's not going to agree with you. You can say that we're the most trustworthy website. If all of the reviews out there aren't, above 4.5 stars, then the internet doesn't agree with you, and Google's not going to agree with you. So there's ways of measuring whatever you're claiming, and often that's through these corroboration sources. So the first thing is just to do, a traditional brand audit. Go and look at, from a PR perspective, what are you saying about yourself? What are others saying about you? Does it align? And does it convince your target audience to choose you over your competitors? The answer to that is no. Go and relook at your branding. And then once you know your branding, then we can talk about all of these other technical SEO things on top. But if you don't know who your brand is, then what are you trying to optimize for, and who and why?
Right. And what I heard there is what we've been saying at Kalicube, which is it's not just your website. SEOs tend to focus on the website, and all of a sudden the website is relatively unimportant.
Very much so, especially when we see Google is actually stepping in as a gatekeeper. So previously in SEO, we would always focus on optimize your category page that had the big keywords, that had traffic. You needed that really strong in order to compete. Now, all of a sudden, Google is acting as the category page. So if you're trying to strengthen your category pages, you're trying to compete with Google, you're going to lose. We know they're always going to take their own interfaces over yours. We're seeing this with vertical surfaces. We see this with Google News. We see this with Google for Jobs. We see this in e-commerce, where more and more the search results are being enhanced with e-commerce features. So rather than focusing on your category pages, really focus on the value that you offer both Google and your target audience, which is your content. Now, that could be your articles, that could be your products, that can be videos that you produce. This is where SEO is going to skew towards that level of content, and that content being high quality, that content adding information gain to Google's index. Information gain is adding something that they don't already know. And that's also valuable to users at the end of the day. That's what they're looking for, something that they trust, something that they didn't know. What do you have that's in that category?
Yeah, sorry. So, I've just got a thumbs up there. When we're looking at creating content that teaches the machine or shows the machine and the user indeed something they didn't already know, do we not then enter an endless chase? Because once the machine's seen it and understood it, it doesn't need it anymore. So we need to present something else new. So we're constantly chasing this. I need to keep creating new things. And everything we've created in the past that's new is no longer needed and no longer visible in the search results.
There will be an aspect of that, but it's not going to be, it adds to Google Index today, so they don't need it by tomorrow. When you're adding new information into the index, or you're adding something where you're really focused on building trust with your users, Google's going to want to cite that because it's not common knowledge, it's new information. So if I have something to add to the conversation, people are going to be like, oh, where did you hear that? Google has that same reaction. Where did you hear that? Let me cite you. And that's how you're going to get citation links, whether that's in SGE or one of the other surfaces. It's in Gemini. You can actually click the button and say, hey, where did you get this information from? And go and check out that website. So this is how we're going to actually get into that Google ecosystem, be cited by Google, and get those users to come and learn more because we're saying something new and interesting.
Right. So what you're suggesting is that things that are common knowledge or things that the machine takes to be common knowledge are ingrained in its brain and it doesn't need to cite anybody because it's common knowledge. Once something is relatively new, and that can be several years old, it needs to cite the sources in order to be convincing. So we have a delay of, let's say, 2 years or 3 years before something becomes common knowledge, at which point we then need to move forwards again.
And I think that delay very much varies depending on industry. So if you're in a news industry, it's not going to be 2-3 years. It's going to be a matter of a couple of days. But if you're the first to say, Taylor Swift broke up with whatever her boyfriend's name is, I have no idea.
No, me neither.
I work in news. This is bad. If you're the first to say that, you break that news story, Google's going to definitely cite that. And then when other people start saying it, if you got it into the index first, you're the one that had the information gain. That builds your topical authority. That builds your brand's EEAT. So the next time you say something about Selena Gomez doing whatever she's doing, then Google's more likely to cite that, show that, because it's new information and they trust you. Well, if you're saying things and then they're proving to be false, other people aren't citing you, or other people are giving you bad reviews, or other people are actively contradicting you, then Google's less likely to trust your brand, less likely to cite your brand, and then you're not going to get play in the ecosystem, not only in search and citations and SGE, but that's going to impact your visibility on Discover. So you need to really be thinking about this as a whole ecosystem of products, tying back to what does Google think about your brand entity or the entities that represent your brand entity, like your authors?
Right. So first point, David, basically saying that you need to become a trusted source for Google for your particular niche, at which point you will be able to feed information to Google and it will cite you regularly over time. And that's a long-term strategy, which is something a lot of companies will balk at. The idea that we need to invest today for something that's going to pay back in 5 years' time because the person we're talking to, the CMO, might not be there in 2 years' time. They need results today. Is there anything they can do to get results today with a strategy that will serve tomorrow?
Not today. I think your lead time, if you know what you're doing and you're doing this well, the shortest lead time I've been able to achieve has been around 3 months. Mm-hmm. And that's with like strong PR, really understanding who the brand is, having it already be a notable brand, so it's easy to get things corroborated through the Wikiverse, for example. If you're not a notable brand, that's going to be extremely difficult to do. The other way you can get in there faster is if you're not a notable brand yet, and you're investing on that and building that, is partnering with people who are notable in the industry. So again, it comes back to a little bit of this expertise is actually valuable, true expertise. And so you can buy that expertise. You can buy the expert authors or pay the expert authors to come and be interviewed or write for your blog, or you can go to conventions and interact with them there, and then cover that in video and put that onto your site. Like, find ways to be credible, to be interesting, to add something new to the conversation, whether that's with your own expertise or whether that's leveraging off the expertise of relevant other entities that you're building relationships with within your industry.
Right, brilliant. And that brings me to a fundamental point about the difference between authors, people, content creators, and corporations. We have the difference between the website owner that is attached to the website, which is the person who owns the website, or the corporation who owns the website, and then the content creators, who are people who, generally speaking, who will contribute to multiple platforms. And you suggested that you can go find somebody who's contributing to other platforms, bring them in and get their credibility to add to your credibility. How, as a person, would you build your own credibility in order to be in the position where other people or the corporations would come in and ask you to write for them, potentially paying you?
I think it's about understanding your then personal entity in the knowledge graph. Do you exist there? So as we saw before, I exist in the knowledge graph. I exist very clearly with a good relationship with lots of other people within the SEO industry, within the marketing industry. That's reflective of real world relationships, and doing things like this, going on podcasts and webinars and speaking at events and being mentioned on those event websites, and writing on notable blogs. So just essentially, if you are in real life a subject matter expert and you're actively participating in your community, then naturally you will become an entity in the knowledge graph. If you are a SEO content writer and today you're writing on real estate and tomorrow you're writing on e-commerce and then the next day you're going to be doing the news desk, your chance of becoming a subject matter expert is next to none. And you're going to find it hard to then tie into those opportunities to be hired as a subject matter expert. So just do what you love. Do what you love and do it well. And
stick to it.
Find a way. Yeah.
You're saying niche down and stick to your topic.
Yeah.
Right. So exactly. Both from a corporate perspective and from an individual perspective, one of the secrets of the future is to be topically authoritative. Niche down, talk about something you're truly expert in, talk a lot about it. Once again, we've got a very kind of long-term strategy, where as an individual, I'm saying I need to contribute to different media sites, I need to go on podcasts, I need to write multiple articles, I need to contribute on social media. That's a lot of work for one individual, especially when they've got a full-time job.
Well, if your full-time job is what you love, then it becomes slightly easier. So that was my tactic. Like, I do SEO for work and I like doing SEO and I do it in my personal time. So that makes my life much easier. But yeah, you can understand it from Google's perspective. If everybody could do it, and if there were millions of subject matter experts, then no one's really a subject matter expert. You just have millions of people contributing to a conversation, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but they've bought Reddit for that. So they don't need that in the knowledge graph. They have this mass collective consciousness comments. Mm-hmm. What they want to be surfacing through search, through generative AI platforms, through vertical surfaces, is expertise. They've told us this multiple times. They've told us this in multiple formats. They've been emphasizing it with quality rater guidelines for many, many years now. So this can't be a shock to any SEO that they're now turning around and saying, if you're going to be putting information into my index, it can't be commodity content that I already understand and can produce better than you with my generative AI. You need to be adding something new to my index to make it valuable for me to invest the crawling resources to come and get that information from you. And when you add that information, I need to be able to trust it so that I feel confident showing that to my users as fact. Otherwise, Google gets the bad press, not the people who put that information into the Google index. So of course, they're going to be very selective about who they trust, and who they recognize, not necessarily trust, but who they recognized as entities of importance through knowledge graph entities. And then you can tell the ones they trust because they're the ones that are being cited.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And from the perspective, the foundation of SEO from 1998, when I started, to today has been crawling and indexing. And with Perplexity now managing to produce incredibly good results with their assistive engine with a very small index, do you think that the fundamentals of SEO from that perspective, crawling and indexing, is going to change?
Yes, and Google's already told us that. They've told us that with their most recent algorithm update, they're trying to wipe out 40% of the content from their index. They're saying we're no longer in a situation where quantity is the most important thing. They're saying very, very clearly, and have been, if you read between the lines for quite some years now, that quality is what is important. So if you're thinking, oh, my goal is to get as many pages, as many category pages in the index as possible, make sure that those long tail queries, even if I have no products, I want to rank my category page anyway, in case I have a product at some point in the future. Like, you're dreaming if you think that's going to be a sustainable long-term strategy. You need to make sure that you can deliver on what you promise, and the quality of the information that you're putting into the index is the cream of the crop.
Right. Now, last little question around this is the idea of on-SERP SEO. I remember years ago, people were starting to say, well, Google's keeping more and more people on the SERP. That's hugely problematic for SEO. They're sending less and less traffic. And with Gemini integrated into the different verticals on Google, plus the Gemini chat machine assistive engine, that's going to get worse.
Yes, horribly worse. But it's about value. If you're in a business model where it's still ad impressions are your primary driver, you're going to be hurt by SGE. There's no sugarcoating that, because you're not going to be getting as much traffic. If you're in a business model where you're driving actual value for your target audience, you're selling a product, or you're providing a service of connecting people together, then traffic was never the point of SEO anyway. The point was the conversion. And it doesn't matter if Google takes the steps prior to that conversion and does that on their platform, as long as they pass the conversion over to you when it's time. So if you're selling a product, why do you care if your product is compared against all of the other products on the Google surface if you still get the sale? If you're in like a jobs industry, why do you care if you still get the lead? As long as you have an SEO strategy that is driving conversions, then you can kind of go with the flow. If you're an SEO strategy that was parasite SEO and getting high impressions and getting high traffic, sorry, SEO is changing, and you get your money out while you can.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Jes. That was brilliant. Now, one last question, which is this one, and you have less than 60 seconds to answer. How does mastering SEO for Google's Gemini help with branded search? Off you go.
It helps with branded search because you can control what Gemini says about your brand. So if I ask Gemini, who is your brand, and it doesn't understand it, and it hallucinates a bunch of incorrect facts, that's not good for your brand. If, on the other hand, I ask who it is and it says exactly who you are, exactly what you do, all of your offerings, and then links to your conversion point, that's definitely value. So it's about training Gemini, training the large language model that powers Gemini Chat, who you are, what you do, and why you are notable. That's what brand is going to be about in the future of Google ecosystems.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Jes. That was wonderful and delightful. And we're going to end with passing the baton. Passing the baton to Jason Somerville next year, the future of consumer products and e-commerce. He's super smart, super interesting. That's going to be a lot of fun and very, very, very informative. Jes, could you possibly pass the baton to Jason?
Sure. So here I am passing the baton to Jason. I think that it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I did a little bit of researching on Jason and learned that he invests for a living and really focuses down on e-commerce. So he's certainly a subject matter expert in the field, and we know that he's going to have a lot of information gain to give in next week's podcast.
So, of course, Jason Somerville is going to perform incredibly well in Gemini in the future because he's all about information gain. Thank you so much, Jes. Thank you, everyone, for watching. See you next week with Jason, and I'll see you next time when we bump into each other somewhere around the world, Jes. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Jes.
Bye.
Kalicube. It's all about your brand SERP.